everybody, this is Joe Joseph, and this is the Sheeple.com's Daily News Brief. Now, I don't have some good news for you because it hasn't been a really good news couple of days here. And I'm going to start with Reason Magazine. Now, Reason Magazine, of course, comes out with some great pieces about some real current event issues that have direct impact on our daily lives. And for a lot of people out there, they rely on the legalized marijuana to help deal with pain, to deal with perhaps epilepsy and other ailments that your big pharma medications, A, don't really take care of, and B, have a lot of side effects. And really, the government has no place to tell you what you can and can't put in your body. Yet, they do so with reckless abandon and destroy so many lives in the process and basically keep fed the private prison industrial complex. And I'll get into that in a minute. But Reason penned a piece, White House expects greater enforcement against states that legalized recreational marijuana. Kind of like hitting back at these states for being naughty and stepping out of line. And it says White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said Thursday that he expects to see greater enforcement of federal drug laws under President Trump's Justice Department in states that have legalized recreational marijuana. During the White House press briefing, Spicer, who asked what the Trump administration policy would be on states that have legalized marijuana, placing them in conflict with federal law, where marijuana schedules remain Schedule 1, U.S. President Obama, former President Obama, and his Justice Department, they issued a memo in 2013 instructing U.S. attorneys to take a hands-off approach to recreational medical marijuana in states that have legalized it. And basically what it is, folks, is if it's not outlined in the Constitution, and believe me, the Drug Enforcement Agency is not outlined in the Constitution. The Center for Disease Control is not outlined in the Constitution. See, they use a very vague clause to state that, and this is the problem. The problem is people that love money and power will go to no ends to get more money and more power. That's what they do. And many years ago, some ambitious individuals cling to what is called the General Welfare Clause of the Constitution. And they use that to justify all of this regulatory bureaucracy that's out there and all of their shenanigans to take your rights away. When in fact, the Constitution really lays out 18 enumerated powers of Congress and lays out all the powers of the executive branch. Department of the Drug Enforcement Agency, no. Department of Energy, no. Department of Education, no. All of that is done under the General Welfare Clause, or has been justified under the General Welfare Clause. But none of it has been successful. As a matter of fact, all we really do, and I don't know if anybody's got it like that. I certainly don't. But I just don't have it like that to where I can flush money down the toilet all the time. And that's what we do. As the American people, we just whoosh, flush it down the toilet because it's idiotic. People will go to whatever ends they have to get what they want, if they want it. You can make it illegal all you want. People are still going to go get it, And then they use the propaganda arm to push their little war on drugs, saying things like, the opioid epidemic out there is killing so many people, when in fact, you have to first define what an epidemic is before you can call it an epidemic. Does this qualify as an epidemic? So once you set your threshold for what is an epidemic, then you can call it an epidemic if it reaches that threshold, which, if that's the case, and they say, opioids are an epidemic in this country or in the state that you live in, well, how about death by DUI, driving under the influence? How about alcoholic incidents? I'll bet you they outnumber opioids. How about, there's so many other things, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, like your ibuprofens, your Tylenols. How many people died as a result of NSAIDs and NSAID abuse. A lot of people don't think, well, how do you abuse NSAIDs? Well, if you take more than they tell you to, it eats away your kidneys and your liver. Even if you take it the way they tell it, over time, it just eats them away. They know this. My wife and I have known people that have passed away because of, they have headaches and they just take ibuprofen all the time, and it gave them cirrhosis and they died. But do you see it getting pulled from the shelf? Do you see Budweiser taken down? No. And the reason why is because there's such a strong lobby against marijuana because of its uses. Big Pharma has put millions upon millions of dollars into lobbying against legalization, and they have a very strong presence in Washington. But this is what Spicer said, quote, "Well, I think that question's for the Department of Justice. I do believe you'll see greater enforcement of it because, again, there's a difference between the medical use that's very different than the recreational use, which is something the Department of Justice will be further looking into." Spicer, of course, referenced opioid abuse and addiction while taking the administration's opposition to recreational marijuana. Now listen to this, because this is a total and complete falsehood. He says there's two distinct issues here, medical marijuana and recreational. Medical marijuana, I've said before, the president understands the pain and suffering many people go through who are facing terminal diseases. How about epilepsy? Why does it have to be terminal? Even for the treatment of pain, why does somebody have to be terminal to get their pain treated? Why can't they have a decent quality of life? Has anybody ever thought about that? I mean, because do you have to get to that point where you're going to die to be able to have relief? I mean, are we that inhumane now as a society? The other thing, too, and let me finish this quote because this is very telling. And he goes on, he says, and the comfort that some of these drugs, including medical marijuana, gives them. That's something that Congress in 2011 put in its appropriation bill, saying the Department of Justice wouldn't be funded to go after those folks. There's a big difference between that and recreational marijuana, and I think when you see something like opioid addiction crisis blossoming in some states around the country, the last thing we should be doing is encouraging people. So there was a study done in 1971 by former Pennsylvania governor, Raymond Schaefer. And that culminated in a publication of the study, Marijuana, a Signal of Misunderstanding. And you can find this on the internet on on archive.org. You should download a copy of this and read it. It's about 200 pages. But one thing that they found among many was that marijuana is not a gateway drug. It doesn't lead people to do other things. That is in the official government study, the biggest study into marijuana government has ever done, which, by the way, runs counter to all of the war on drugs legislation and policies that the government now holds dear. In 1972, it was recommended that they decriminalize marijuana because it's way overblown, because the facts get in the way of the story. And so Governor Schaefer's recommendation was get rid of all this stuff. It said, some of the findings were it didn't impair driving, didn't make people violent. They didn't go and create, and people that use marijuana didn't want to go out and just compulsively rob a bank or beat people up. No. You know what I think the biggest side effects are? Is it may contribute to the obesity problem because people will just have munchies. A lot of munchies, and that could be a big problem. But marijuana legalization advocates condemn the comments, which appear to backtrack from Trump's statement on the campaign trail that marijuana legalization was a state issue, and it really is. They have no place to tell you. First of all, they have no place for this. The states really have no place to tell you what you can and can't put in your body. Your body is your property. The state does not own you. And they say, well, we're protecting your rights. No, you're not. You're violating my rights. You're violating my rights. Not only are you violating my rights, but you're robbing people, again, of the chance to have a decent quality of life. It goes on to say, if the administration is looking for ways to become less popular, cracking down on voter-approved marijuana laws would be a great way to do it. This according to Tom Engel, the chairman of Marijuana Majority. He said on the campaign trail, President Trump clearly and repeatedly pledged that he would leave decisions on cannabis policy to the states. With a clear and growing majority of the country now supporting legalization, reneging on promises would be a political disaster and a huge distraction from the rest of the president's agenda. And he's absolutely right. But just to go to show you how shady the war on drugs is and how they have nowhere near. See, folks, we have the moral high ground. Government does not have the moral high ground. They never have the moral high ground. But we do. And to highlight and preface this, the Free Thought Project highlighted and exposed last year some of the crazy things and some of the extremes that police will go to bust people. And in this case, busting people for buying crack. Now, there's no difference between crack and cocaine outside of the way that it physically is. The crack is like a rock form of cocaine, whereas cocaine itself is a powder. Now, it says this is Claire Burnish of the Free Thought Project. She wrote this about a year ago. It says a reverse buy bust appears to be in the works for the Albuquerque Police Department. Now, they, my friends, are manufacturing and selling people crack. That's what they do to get people busted. Think about that. Now, if it wasn't available, they wouldn't be able to commit the crime and they wouldn't be in jail. But the police, of course, in trapping people, this is what they do. This is along the lines of civil asset forfeiture, totally and completely criminal, yet supported by the state. It is state-sanctioned criminality. And it says, but the details of how they plan to go about catching low-level drug users by becoming crack cocaine manufacturers signifies everything inherently corrupt about the U.S. war on drugs. Burke Media exclusively revealed APD's intentions to become temporary crack manufacturers after a confidential source shared the affidavit about the impending bust. Listen to this. Powdered cocaine may be taken into APD's criminalistics unit to be made into crack cocaine. This according to an affidavit and motion to release evidence dated February 25, 2016 and signed by a district court judge. In addition to the police-manufactured crack, APD is also permitted to use methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin from its cataloged evidence stores to become drug dealers in order to catch individuals who use those illegal substances. Quote, once the transaction is completed, the individual purchasing the drugs will be arrested and charged with felony possession of a controlled substance. The detectives will attempt to immediately retrieve the drugs sold. Now, if that doesn't sound shady as hell to you, I don't know what does. And this is the ends that government will go to feed the prison industrial complex. And you have no idea how important it is. As a matter of fact, if you remember, Chairman Obama and his administration had started to divest themselves of the private prison system. And, you know, there was a lot of backlash from the private prison lobby. However, we were making a little bit of progress in that way. But now, under President Trump and Attorney General Sessions, they have reversed that stance and instead are bringing back the prison industrial complex with a vengeance, with reckless abandon. I'm telling you. And so if they push this war on drugs even more, you're going to see more people being busted for something that there's absolutely no crime being committed. Because let's define what a crime is, okay? A crime is where you have a victim that has been damaged in some way. That's the real true definition of a crime. You have to have a victim. If there's no victim, there's no crime. And what they've done is they've said, well, you know, the state's a victim. The people are a victim. And that's why it's always, you know, the state of blank versus, because they consider the state a person, just like it's a corporation, you know. The state's a corporation. Citizens United in 2010 reaffirmed that people are corporations and corporations are people. Therefore, if your state is incorporated, and most of them are, just like your cities are incorporated, why, they're people and they can be damaged. You see what I'm saying? It's just absolutely asinine. So this creates a whole population of people that then go to the private prison industrial complex, and the private prison industrial complex gets labor at 25 cents an hour. which, by the way, is cheaper than the slave labor over in China. Let's just be clear about that. People think, oh, yeah, we're the United States. We're so far above everybody else. We're hoity-toity and everything else. We don't do slavery anymore. Baloney. We certainly do slavery. We do slavery in the form of the private prison industrial complex. Why? Because people were trying to get things to put in their bodies. Did they harm anybody? No. A lot of people say, well, you're enabling people to do drugs. No. It's not your place to say. See, the I know what's best for you doesn't work here. Because regardless of what you think, people are going to do what they want to do. It's just that, it's that true. It's that simple. So here are some very, very interesting things and reversals that I've seen come out from the Trump administration that should have a lot of people worried. A lot of people worried. Charles Evans Hughes wrote about this as well in his blog of Two Minds. And he writes, just as the war on drugs criminalized and destroyed large swaths of African American and Latino communities, on top of that now, the war on cash is further going to criminalize the few remaining avenues to financial independence and freedoms. And he's absolutely right. So at the same time that they're cracking down on this, they're also cracking down on cash and cash transactions because they say, well, all these drug transactions and all this, well, it happens with cash. And we got to be able to track it so we can catch these bad individuals that do all this stuff. They use this as a prime motivator to crack down on it. Now he continues, he says, the introduction of entitlement welfare in the 1960s generated a toxic dependency on the state that institutionalized worklessness, a 1-2 punch that undermined marriage and family in the American working class of all ethnicities. And the war on drugs launched in the 1970s turned millions of American males into felons with severely restricted rights and opportunities in mainstream America. And now we see this is very strange, but same destructive pattern, repeatedly disabling and being the new welfare and legal synthetic heroin, being the new street smack that lays waste to entire communities. Once you're dependent on the state for disability and synthetic smack, you're owned by the government, lock, stock, and barrel. And that's really what it is. You want to stop dependency? That's a great place to start. That's a great place to start. And that's not to say people don't need a hand up, but they certainly don't need a hand out, because that certainly does not promote self-sufficiency. Now, when the temptation to sell your $3 Medicaid prescription for synthetic smack for a quick $1,000 becomes too much to resist, bang, you've got a one-way ticket into the hell of America's criminal justice system. Do you see the pattern? Offer the blandishments of free money and nearly free synthetic smack, and the vulnerable populace is quickly reduced to a dependent state of worklessness and addiction. Needless to say, an addicted, ill, workless populace that is herded into the grinder of the criminal justice system isn't going to create any political resistance. They have their hands full just trying to stay alive and avoid being sucked into the voracious maw of the criminalization meat grinder. And this is the context for the upcoming war on cash and the criminalization of financial independence, which you see coming now. And what can honestly happen here, and what I think might very well happen in the near future, is as the weather gets warmer, you're going to have more protests, culminating in a May Day march on Washington, according to a lot of these Soros propaganda sites, that is going to promote civil unrest and perhaps disrupt the economy in some way. Not to mention the fact that you have a Federal Reserve that President Trump and his administration is openly critical about, that is going to find every way possible to justify raising interest rates. And when they do that, that's going to put the brakes on things. Because you have to understand that any sort of tax reform that is going to come through isn't going to come through right away. As a matter of fact, I think Steve Mnuchin has come out and said August is the earliest that they can possibly get it through. So in the meantime, that gives the Fed a lot of time to boost interest rates, and that's going to put the brakes on everything when that happens, whatever's left of any sort of momentum that we don't have. Now, if you can foment a crisis, then you can get what you want that you wanted prior to, because people are going to be clamoring for it. And in this case, they're going to basically cut off the cash supply. They're going to shrink the money supply down to what they say is reduce inflation. But that's not really what it's designed to do. They are going to crash the economy, and then they're going to blame it on the Trump administration and his policies. And then in doing so, they're going to present a solution. And this is just all speculation, but this is based on years of research. They'll present the solution that, cash is the problem, and that the solution is just to do away with it. Now, there's some good things about it. It's awful convenient just to have that card or have your smartphone or be able to do that electronic transaction. But the downside is privacy. You have absolutely no privacy. And you can tell based on the police state. I mean, look at what the clandestine operations and the deep state have done to President Trump. Look at what they've done to Michael Flynn. And the fact that they record everything, they see everything, they know what you buy, they know what you eat, they know everything you do, they know what you make, all down to the penny, and also to be able to control you. They at any time can make you look like a criminal. They at any time can make you look like an evildoer. You're evil, and take you out just because they have access to your entire life. And it's no problem to them. And believe me, folks, they have no scruples and they have no conscience. And they will destroy you. They will destroy you. So this, of course, is the context for the upcoming war on cash. And Charles writes, every conventional means of remaining financial independence of the state cartel banking system is being restricted and criminalized. The better to herd everybody into the centrally controlled institutions. And those attempting to escape the political financial pen, why, they're threatened with the other pen. And that, of course, being the penitentiary. That's right. Go to jail. God forbid you want to raise your kids the way you want to. Criminal. Go to jail. You want to treat yourself for any ailments. Because, Native Americans, and this is a problem that I have because it's not consistent across the board. Again, the rule of law has to apply to everybody. Native Americans, Amish, other religious sects of people are able to do things that society says is bad. Like, for example, ritual herbs. Say, for example, peyote. Native Americans can use that in their religious rituals. Now, if you have peyote going down the street, man, they're going to bust you. Now, you can do that for religious purposes. Now, I'm going down the street. I got peyote, right? And I say, look, this is my religious right. This is for religious purposes. You know what's going to happen to me? I'm going to be making cheap furniture in the prison industrial system because I went to prison for having a controlled substance. See, it's not consistent across the board. And really, it should just be done away with. A great blueprint to manage this would be Amsterdam. Amsterdam, everything's legal. If you need a place to go and take care of your, if you do heroin or anything like that, and you need a place to go, they provide you a place. They give you clean needles. They have Narcan on hand in case anything happens, which is another thing too. Just like the EpiPen issue, and I think everybody should have an EpiPen in their house because God only knows when you're going to have an allergic reaction or your kids are going to have an allergic reaction, and you need to be able to respond fast. And here you have something that's cheap and effective in treating that, so everybody should have one, yet we don't. Why? Oh, greed. Well, Narcan's the same thing. If you bring opioid medication home because perhaps you threw your back out or something like that, and you have kids, you should have Narcan in your house because God forbid, a child get into a medicine cabinet or something like that, and there's an accident. Then they become a statistic that never had to happen in the first place when there's a medication available to reverse the effects of an overdose, or an accident. Why would you not have that in everybody's medicine cabinet in America? Or at least make it readily available. I mean, I can't imagine that it would cost that much to manufacture. Much like the EpiPen. They charge, $600 for 2 EpiPens, and it costs about $3 to make. Seriously, I mean, it's absolutely asinine and absurd, and it's another way that humanity falls prey to the greed of the powers that shouldn't be. And it's unbelievable. These are serious problems that require very, very simple solutions, folks. And we have the power to make those solutions possible. We just have to be active. I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief, and I'll have one again for you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.